Imagine reaching into a jar of loose change, pulling out an ordinary-looking penny, and realizing it has been quietly traveling through American history for more than 50 years. Not flashy, not famous, but far more interesting than most people ever expect. Today, we're talking about the 1973 Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that many Americans have owned, spent, or ignored without ever knowing the story it carries. The 1973 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck in Denver, identified by the small letter D just below the date on the front of the coin. At first glance, it looks almost identical to millions of other Lincoln cents. Abraham Lincoln faces right on the front, calm and familiar, while the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. It's the kind of coin you might have held as a child, dropped into a vending machine, or saved in a coffee can without a second thought. But once you slow down and look closer, this penny begins to tell a deeper story. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the early 1970s. America was going through a time of major change. The Vietnam War was winding down, inflation was rising, and the country was facing an energy crisis. Money itself was under pressure. Just a year earlier, in 1971, the United States had ended the gold standard. Even the humble penny was affected by these economic shifts. The 1973 Lincoln cent was made during a time when copper prices were climbing. Pennies were still composed mostly of copper, and the cost to produce them was becoming a real concern for the government. In 1973, the U.S. Mint struck pennies using a metal composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This made the coin heavier and more valuable in metal content than modern pennies struck after 1982, which are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. The Denver Mint was especially busy that year. Over 2.6 billion Lincoln pennies were produced with the D Mint mark in 1973. That's a huge number, and it explains why many people assume this coin can't possibly be valuable. But rarity in coin collecting is not always about how many were made. It's about condition, mistakes, and survival over time. Let's talk about the design. On the front, Abraham Lincoln appears in a dignified profile, a design first introduced in 1909 to mark the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1973, this portrait had been familiar to Americans for decades. Below Lincoln's bust, you'll find the date 1973, and just beneath it, the small D Mint mark indicating Denver. The words "In God We Trust" arc across the top, while "Liberty" sits to the left. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall. If you look very closely at high-quality examples, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. It's one of the smallest detailed elements ever placed on a U.S. coin, and many people never notice it at all. Now, here's where things get interesting. While most 1973 D pennies are common in worn condition, certain examples stand out. Coins that were never circulated, meaning they never entered everyday use, can still have their original red copper color. These are known as red cents, and collectors value them far more than brown or darkened examples. Condition matters more than almost anything else. A 1973 D penny that has scratches, discoloration, or heavy wear might be worth only 1 cent. But a sharply struck coin with full detail, strong luster, and no damage can be worth significantly more to collectors. Errors also play a big role in value. During the minting process, mistakes sometimes happen, and 1973 D pennies are known for a few collectible errors. Some examples show doubled letters or numbers, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled due to misalignment during striking. Others may have off-center strikes, where the design isn't perfectly centered on the coin. There are also rare cases of clipped planchets, where a piece of the coin's edge is missing because the metal blank was improperly cut. These errors are accidental, but collectors love them because each one is unique. No two error coins are exactly alike. So how valuable can a 1973 D Lincoln penny actually be? In everyday condition, circulated examples usually sell for just a few cents. But uncirculated examples in top condition can sell for several dollars, sometimes more. High-grade coins certified by professional grading services have sold at auction for surprising amounts, especially those with strong red color and flawless surfaces. Error coins can be worth even more. Depending on the type and severity of the error, some 1973 D pennies have sold for tens, hundreds, or even over $1,000. These prices are not common, but they are real, and they show why collectors always check their change carefully. If you think you might have a valuable example, knowing how to identify a real one is important. First, check the date and the mint mark. The D should be clear and well-formed. Look at the color of the coin. Original copper pennies have a warm reddish tone when uncirculated, not a dull brown or artificially shiny surface. Next, examine the details. Lincoln's hair, beard, and coat should show sharp lines on higher quality coins. On the back, the steps of the Lincoln Memorial should be distinct. Blurry details often mean heavy wear. Be cautious of coins that look too perfect. Some people attempt to clean or polish old pennies to make them look better, but this actually lowers their value. A cleaned coin may appear shiny, but it often has unnatural brightness and fine scratches that collectors can spot instantly. There are also counterfeit coins, though they are less common for this date. Fakes may have incorrect weight, unusual color, or poorly formed letters. A real 1973 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams and feel solid in the hand. One fun fact about the 1973 penny is that it comes from the last full decade when U.S. pennies were mostly copper. Just a few years later, rising metal costs would force the mint to change the composition. That makes these coins part of the end of an era, whether people realize it or not. Another surprising detail is how many of these pennies are still sitting in jars, drawers, and collections across the country. Because they were so common, many were saved casually, not as investments but as memories. Today, those same coins are being rediscovered by a new generation of collectors. Collectors love the 1973 Lincoln penny not because it's flashy, but because it represents everyday American history. It's a coin that passed through countless hands during a turbulent time in the country. Gas stations, grocery stores, movie theaters, school cafeterias. This penny was there for all of it. For beginners, it's an affordable way to enter the hobby. For experienced collectors, it's a challenge to find in perfect condition or with unusual errors. And for history lovers, it's a tangible connection to the early 1970s. Preserved in copper. As you go through your own coins, remember this. Value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary. The 1973 Lincoln penny may not make headlines, but it has a story worth telling, and in the right condition, it can still surprise you. So the next time you see a penny dated 1973 with a small D beneath the year, don't rush past it. Hold it for a moment. Look closely, because even the smallest coin can carry decades of history, and sometimes a little more value than anyone ever expected. Most people have held this coin without ever giving it a second thought. It looks ordinary, it feels ordinary, and it often sits forgotten in a jar or a drawer. But what if I told you that one small detail on a 1976 Lincoln penny can change the way collectors see it, and in certain cases make it far more valuable than 1 cent? The coin we're talking about today is the 1976 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it seems like just another copper-colored cent from the 1970s. But behind this coin is a fascinating story tied to American history, changing metals, collector demand, and a few surprising details that many people still overlook. The 1976 D Lincoln penny was made in the United States during a very special year. 1976 marked the bicentennial of the United States, celebrating 200 years since the Declaration of Independence. While many Americans remember the special quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coins issued for the bicentennial, the Lincoln penny did not receive a special design that year. Instead, it quietly continued its familiar look, making it easy to miss its historical context. This penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small letter D below the date on the front of the coin. The Denver Mint was producing massive quantities of coins during the 1970s to keep up with everyday circulation, and the 1976 D penny was no exception. Millions upon millions were made, and they flowed directly into pockets, cash registers, and piggy banks across the country. On the front of the coin, you'll see the classic portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design first appeared in 1909 and has become one of the most recognized coin images in American history. Lincoln faces to the right with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1976 to the right. Just below the date sits the small but important D Mint mark. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. This design was used from 1959 until 2008 and shows the famous Washington, D.C. monument in fine detail. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, a detail that still impresses collectors today. One of the most important things to understand about the 1976 D penny is its metal content. Unlike modern pennies, this coin was made primarily of copper. It contains about 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it a heavier feel and richer color compared to today's copper-plated zinc cents. This alone makes it more appealing to many collectors, especially those who enjoy older copper coins. So if millions were made, why does this coin matter? The answer lies in condition, errors, and collector interest. While most 1976 D pennies are only worth face value, some examples stand out dramatically. Coins that were carefully preserved, never circulated, and stored properly can reach much higher prices than people expect. Uncirculated examples, especially those with full original luster and no major marks, are sought after by collectors who build date and mint mark sets. In professional grading, condition matters more than age. A flawless coin from 1976 can be far more valuable than a worn coin from the early 1900s. There are also error coins from 1976 D that collectors actively search for. These are mistakes made during the minting process, and they can transform an ordinary penny into something special. Some known errors include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the coin. Others include double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during production. Another interesting error involves die cracks or cuds, where cracks in the minting die leave raised lines or blobs of metal on the finished coin. These errors are unpredictable, and that's part of their appeal. No two error coins are exactly the same. When it comes to real-world value, auction records tell an important story. Circulated 1976 D pennies typically sell for 1 or 2 cents, sometimes a bit more if copper prices rise. However, high-grade uncirculated examples that have been professionally graded can sell for several dollars, and in top conditions even higher. Error coins are where things get exciting. A well-documented double die or a dramatic off-center strike from 1976 D can sell for tens, hundreds, or in rare cases, thousands of dollars, depending on the severity of the error and the coin's condition. These are not common finds, but they do exist, and they continue to surface in collections and old rolls. Knowing how to identify a genuine 1976 D penny is important, especially for new collectors. First, always check the date and the mint mark. The D should appear just below the date on the front. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams if it's the standard copper composition. A digital scale is a simple and useful tool for this. Look closely at the details. The lettering should be clear, and the edges should be smooth, not reeded. Be cautious of altered coins where someone may have added a mint mark or changed a date. Under magnification, these alterations often look uneven or unnatural. Another helpful step is using a magnet. A genuine 1976 D penny will not stick to a magnet because of its copper content. If it does, something is wrong. There are also a few fun facts that make this coin even more interesting. Even though it was made during the bicentennial year, the penny design remained unchanged, making it one of the few circulating coins at the time that did not celebrate the event visually. This contrast adds a quiet historical charm to the coin. Another surprising detail is how many of these pennies were saved by the public. During the 1970s, many Americans believed copper pennies would one day become valuable simply because of their metal content. As a result, large numbers were hoarded, rolled, and stored away, which is why uncirculated examples still appear today. Collectors love the 1976 D Lincoln penny not because it's flashy, but because it represents a specific moment in American history. It connects the familiar image of Lincoln with a year of national celebration and change. It also serves as an excellent entry point for new collectors, offering a mix of affordability, history, and the thrill of searching for errors. For seasoned collectors, it's a reminder that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes, it's hidden in small details, sharp corners, original shine, or a tiny mistake made decades ago at a busy mint as you go through your change. Take a second look at those older pennies. That small D under the date might not mean much at first glance, but it could lead you into a deeper appreciation of American coinage and the stories each coin carries. The next time you hold a 1976 D Lincoln penny, remember this. It's more than just spare change. It's a piece of copper history from a year that defined a nation, quietly passing through millions of hands, waiting for someone curious enough to really look at it. Have you ever looked at a penny in your pocket and wondered if it could be hiding a secret worth far more than 1 cent? What if a simple 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark at all could tell a story that most people never notice? This coin is the 1978 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin with no mint mark. That missing mint mark is not a mistake. It simply means the penny was made at the Philadelphia Mint. In 1978, Philadelphia did not place a mint mark on pennies, so millions were released into circulation looking just like this one. At first glance, it seems ordinary. But like many everyday objects, the real story begins when you look closer. The year 1978 was an interesting moment in American history. The country was moving through economic change, inflation was still fresh in people's minds, and cash was king. Pennies were used constantly, and the U.S. Mint needed enormous numbers of them to keep commerce moving. The Lincoln cent design, which had already been around for decades, continued to serve as a familiar symbol of stability and tradition. The Lincoln penny itself has a long and meaningful history. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the 1-cent coin in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1978, Lincoln had been on the penny for nearly 70 years. The front of the coin shows his profile, calm and steady, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. The back features the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny seated Lincoln inside the memorial, a detail many people never notice. The 1978 no-mint mark penny is made mostly of copper. At that time, pennies were composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This would change just a few years later, making 1978 part of the final era of traditional copper cents. Because of this, some collectors are drawn to the coin simply for its metal content and its place in history and in terms of appearance. This penny has a warm reddish tone when well preserved. Fresh examples have strong details in Lincoln's hair, sharp lettering, and clean lines on the Lincoln Memorial. Most circulated coins, however, show wear. The high points of Lincoln's face and the steps of the memorial often fade first. That wear is one of the key factors that separates a common penny from a valuable one. So why would anyone care about a 1978 penny when so many were made? The answer lies in condition, errors, and the stories collectors love to chase. While millions of these pennies were struck, very few survived in perfect condition. Coins that were never spent, never scratched, and never dulled by time are surprisingly rare. Collectors use grading to describe a coin's condition, ranging from heavily worn to mint state. A 1978 no-mint mark penny that has been circulated is usually worth only 1 cent. But a coin in mint state, especially one with full red color and no visible flaws, can be worth significantly more. In top grades, these pennies become difficult to find. There are also error coins that make certain 1978 pennies stand out. Some examples show doubling in the letters or numbers, where parts of the design appear slightly repeated. This can happen during the minting process and is not caused by damage after the coin is made. Other errors include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or unusual thickness. These errors are not common, and when verified, they can add real value. Real auction results show how condition changes everything. Ordinary circulated examples sell for face value or a few cents. But high-grade uncirculated 1978 no-mint mark pennies have sold for tens, hundreds, and in rare cases over $1,000 when certified by professional grading services. These prices are not typical, but they prove that even modern pennies can become valuable under the right conditions. Collectors often look for coins graded MS-67 or higher. These grades indicate exceptional preservation. Only a small number of 1978 pennies meet that standard, which is why serious collectors compete for them. When demand meets scarcity, prices rise. Identifying a genuine 1978 no-mint mark penny is straightforward, but careful observation matters. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1978. Next, look just below the date. There should be no letter, no D, no S, nothing at all. that confirms it was minted in Philadelphia. The design should match the Lincoln Memorial style, not the newer shield design introduced decades later. Avoid fakes or altered coins. Examine the surface carefully. The date and lettering should look natural, not carved or uneven. Added or removed mint marks usually leave signs of tampering. Weight can also help. A genuine 1978 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. Any major difference could be a warning sign. One fun fact about this coin is how often it is overlooked. Many people have spent these pennies without a second thought. Some were saved in jars, drawers, and coffee cans, forgotten for decades. Occasionally, someone opens an old container and finds rolls of bright red pennies that have never been touched. Moments like that are what keep collectors searching. Another surprising detail is how close this coin is to a major change in U.S. coinage. Just 4 years later, in 1982, the mint shifted to a mostly zinc composition. That makes 1978 part of the last generation of classic copper pennies, a detail that adds quiet historical importance. Collectors love this coin today not because it is flashy, but because it represents possibility. It reminds people that value is not always obvious. A coin that looks ordinary can become special through preservation, rarity, or a simple mistake at the mint. It also connects people to a shared past, when small change mattered and every penny had real purchasing power. For new collectors, the 1978 no-mint mark penny is an easy entry point. It is affordable, widely available, and teaches the basics of grading and inspection. For experienced collectors, high-grade examples offer a challenge that is surprisingly difficult to conquer. As you think about this coin, consider how many have passed through your hands. Think about the stories they carry, from grocery stores to gas stations, from payphones to piggy banks. Most were spent and forgotten. A few were saved, and an even smaller number survived in pristine condition, waiting to be discovered. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a penny that looks completely ordinary, yet it has a story tied to American history, millions of daily transactions, and a few rare surprises that collectors still search for today. This is the story of the 1979 Lincoln penny, a small coin with a big past. The 1979 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint at the Denver Mint. The small letter D beneath the date tells us where it was made. At first glance, it looks just like many other Lincoln pennies, but its place in history, its metal content, and a few unusual varieties make it more interesting than most people realize. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the year 1979. America was changing. Gas prices were high, inflation was rising, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies to keep up with everyday commerce. The Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for 70 years, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. By 1979, it had become one of the most familiar objects in American life. The Denver Mint played a major role that year. In 1979 alone, the Denver facility struck over 4 billion Lincoln pennies. These coins were made to move quickly through the economy, from grocery store counters to piggy banks, cash registers, and coin jars across the country. No one at the time thought of them as collectibles. They were simply money. The design of the 1979 penny is classic and instantly recognizable. On the front or obverse is the profile of Abraham Lincoln facing right. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and has been used since 1909. Above Lincoln's head is the word liberty, and in front of his face is the phrase "In God We Trust." Below is the date, 1979, with the small D mint mark just under it. The back of the coin, known as the reverse, features the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 to mark 150 years since Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the memorial, you can actually see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln in the center, making this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. One of the most important features of the 1979 Lincoln penny is what it's made of. This coin was struck using a copper-based alloy consisting of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This makes it part of the last generation of mostly copper pennies. Just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to zinc cores with a thin copper coating. Because of this, Many collectors value pre-1982 pennies for their metal content alone. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made in the billions? The answer lies in condition, rarity within variety, and minting errors. While most 1979 D pennies are only worth face value, a small number stand out. Condition is everything in coin collecting. A penny that has been heavily used, scratched, or worn down is common. But a coin that looks almost exactly the way it did the day it left the mint is a different story. High-grade, uncirculated 1979 D pennies with full red color and no damage are much harder to find than most people expect. Professional coin grading services evaluate coins on a scale from 1 to 70. A 1979 D penny graded MS67 or higher, meaning mint state with exceptional quality, can sell for hundreds or even over $1,000. These coins are rare because most were quickly circulated and exposed to wear. Then there are mint errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process, and they can dramatically increase a coin's value. Some 1979 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is not properly aligned. Others show broad strikes, where the coin spreads out wider than normal due to missing collars during striking. There are also double die varieties from this year. These occur when the die used to strike the coin has a misalignment during its creation, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On some 1979 pennies, doubling can be seen on the date or lettering. These varieties are subtle, but collectors pay close attention to them. Real-world auction results help show why collectors still care about this coin. High-grade 1979 D pennies certified by major grading services have sold at auction for several $100s, and in rare cases over $1,000. Error coins, depending on the type and visibility of the mistake, can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s or more. Knowing how to identify a genuine 1979 D Lincoln penny is important. Start by checking the date and mint mark. The D should be small and clean, located just below the date. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams, consistent with copper-based pennies of that era. The color should reflect natural copper tones, ranging from bright red to brown, depending on age and storage. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to modify common pennies to make them appear rare. Magnification helps. A real mint error will show natural flow lines and consistent wear, while altered coins often have tool marks or unnatural surfaces. If you think you found something special, professional grading is the safest way to confirm authenticity. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1979 D penny. Because it is mostly copper, the metal value of the coin has sometimes approached or even exceeded 1 cent during periods of high copper prices. This has led many people to save old pennies, even common ones, simply for their metal content. Another interesting detail is that many Americans born in the 1960s and 1970s remember these pennies from childhood. They were everywhere, often the first coins kids learned to recognize and count. This nostalgia adds emotional value that goes beyond price guides and auction records. Collectors today love the 1979 D Lincoln penny not because it is rare in general, but because it represents the end of an era. It comes from the final years of traditional copper pennies. It connects to a familiar design that stayed nearly unchanged for decades, and it offers the excitement of hidden varieties waiting to be discovered. For new collectors, this coin is approachable. It can be found in pocket change, old jars, and family collections. For experienced collectors, it offers a challenge. Finding that perfect high-grade example or a legitimate mint error among millions of ordinary coins. As you look at a 1979 D Lincoln penny, remember that its value is not just measured in cents or dollars. It carries history, craftsmanship, and the quiet thrill of possibility. Most are ordinary, but a few are extraordinary, and you never know which one you might be holding. So the next time you come across a small copper penny dated 1979 with a tiny D beneath the date, take a closer look. It might just be a simple reminder of everyday America, or it could be a piece of history that still has a few secrets left to tell. Most people would never look twice at a 1984 penny. Small, brown, and easy to ignore. But what if I told you that some 1984 Lincoln pennies are quietly selling for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and that one tiny detail could completely change its value? This video is about the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have owned, spent, or tossed into jars without ever realizing what they had. At first glance, it looks ordinary. But hidden within this common coin is a story of history, mistakes, and rare details that collectors actively hunt for today. The 1984 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint during a time of major change in American coinage. By 1984, the Lincoln cent had already been part of daily life for more than 75 years. It featured Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that Americans instantly recognized and trusted. When you see a 1984 penny with no mint mark, it means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For many years, coins from Philadelphia were not marked with a letter. This often confuses people, but no mint mark does not mean the coin is missing something. It simply means Philadelphia made it.in 1984. The United States was in a period of economic recovery. Inflation from the late 1970s had slowed, and everyday coins like the penny were still widely used for purchases. Vending machines, parking meters, and cash transactions all depended on coins, so the mint produced pennies in massive numbers to meet demand. That year, more than 7.5 billion Lincoln pennies were struck in Philadelphia alone. Because of that, most 1984 no-mint mark pennies are still only worth 1 cent. But this is where the story gets interesting. When billions of coins are made, mistakes are bound to happen. The design of the 1984 Lincoln penny is simple but iconic. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his head is the word liberty. In front of his face is the date, 1984. Along the edge is the phrase, "In God we trust." The designer of this portrait was Victor David Brenner, whose initials, VDB, appear subtly on the coin. On the back of the coin, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside. This reverse design was used from 1959 until 2008 and became one of the most recognizable coin designs in American history. The metal composition of the 1984 penny is also important. By this time, pennies were no longer mostly copper. Rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition in 1982. The 1984 penny is made of zinc with a thin copper coating. It weighs about 2.5 grams, lighter than older copper pennies. Now let's talk about what makes some 1984 no-mint mark pennies valuable. The answer is not the date alone. It's the errors. The most famous and valuable error associated with this coin is known as the 1984 doubled ear Lincoln penny. This is not a small scratch or damage. It is a clear doubling that appears on Lincoln's ear, caused by a mistake during the die creation process. When a coin die is made, it is supposed to transfer the design cleanly. In some cases, the design is impressed more than once but slightly misaligned. This creates a doubled image that is raised, not flat. On the 1984 doubled ear penny, Lincoln's ear appears to have a second outline or extra thickness that is easy to spot once you know what to look for. This error was not intentional, and it was not caught immediately. As a result, a small number of these error coins entered circulation. Over time, collectors discovered the doubling and began searching through rolls of pennies to find more. Today, a genuine 1984 no-mint mark doubled ear penny can be worth serious money. In circulated condition, examples have sold for several $100s. In higher grades, especially those with strong doubling and minimal wear, prices can reach into the thousands. There have been documented auction sales where certified examples sold for over $3,000. The exact value depends on condition, clarity of the doubling, and whether the coin has been professionally graded by a trusted service. It's important to understand that not every 1984 penny with something unusual on the ear is valuable. Many coins show damage from circulation, scratches, or metal distortion. True doubled ear coins show clean, rounded doubling that matches known examples. So how can you tell if you might have a real one? First, check the date. It must be 1984, and there should be no mint mark under the date. Second, look closely at Lincoln's ear using a magnifying glass. A real doubled ear will show a second, raised outline on the lower part of the ear. It will not look flat, smeared, or scratched. Third, examine the rest of the coin. Most genuine examples show doubling only on the ear, not across the entire face. If you see strange doubling everywhere, it is more likely machine doubling, which is not valuable. If you believe you've found a real doubled ear penny, the next step is authentication. Reputable coin grading services can confirm whether the coin is genuine and assign it a grade. This step is critical before selling, as buyers trust certified coins far more than raw ones. There are also other minor errors found on 1984 pennies, such as off-center strikes, die cracks, and weak strikes. While these can add some value, they usually do not reach the levels of the doubled ear variety. One surprising fact is that many doubled ear pennies were found by ordinary people searching through pocket change or bankrolls. Some collectors discovered them decades after the coins were minted. This means there could still be undiscovered examples sitting in jars, drawers, or inherited collections. Collectors love the 1984 doubled ear penny because it combines familiarity with rarity. Everyone recognizes a Lincoln penny, but very few people know about this error. That sense of hidden treasure is what drives the excitement. Another reason collectors value this coin is visibility. Unlike microscopic errors that require special equipment to see, the doubled ear can be spotted with basic magnification. That makes it appealing to both beginners and experienced collectors. The coin also represents a moment in modern minting history. Errors like this became less common as technology improved. Finding a clear double die from the 1980s is much harder than from earlier decades, which adds to its appeal. There's also a psychological factor. The idea that a 1-cent coin could be worth thousands captures the imagination. It reminds people that history, mistakes, and value can hide in the most ordinary places. Even if you don't find a doubled ear example, learning about the 1984 no-mint mark penny can change how you look at everyday money. Coins are not just tools for spending. They are records of decisions, technology, and human error. So the next time you come across a small brown penny dated 1984, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it up to the light. Look closely at Lincoln's ear. That tiny detail could tell a much bigger story. And who knows? The most valuable coin you ever own might not come from a treasure chest or an auction house. It might already be waiting for you, quietly hiding in plain sight. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out an ordinary penny, and discovering it carries a hidden story from America's recent past. A story tied to factories, millions of hands, and a single small letter that quietly marks its place in history. Today, we're exploring one of the most overlooked coins in modern circulation. The 1985 D-Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, this coin looks completely normal. It's a brown or copper-colored penny with Abraham Lincoln's face on the front, just like many others you've seen your entire life. But the 1985 D Lincoln penny represents a specific moment in U.S. history, a moment when the penny itself was changing and collectors today are paying closer attention than ever before. The 1985 D-Mint Mark Lincoln penny was struck in the year 1985 at the Denver Mint. The small letter D, found just below the date on the front of the coin, tells us exactly where it was made. That single letter is important. It connects the coin to one of the most productive mints in the United States, a mint that was operating at full speed during the mid-1980s. To understand this coin, we need to step back into the mid-1980s. America was in a time of transition. Technology was growing, industries were changing, and even something as small as the penny was being closely examined. Copper prices had risen dramatically in the late 1970s and early 1980s, forcing the U.S. Mint to rethink how pennies were made. By 1982, the Mint officially switched from solid copper pennies to copper-plated zinc ones. That means the 1985 D penny is not solid copper, even though it looks like it. It contains mostly zinc, with a thin copper coating on the outside. This change was all about cost. The government needed to keep producing pennies without losing money on the metal itself. The 1985 penny is part of that new era, when pennies became lighter, cheaper, and more practical to produce. On the front of the coin, you see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design was created by Victor David Brenner and first introduced in 1909, making it one of the longest-running designs in U.S. coinage history. By 1985, this portrait had already been in use for more than 75 years. Lincoln faces to the right with the words "In God We Trust" above him, "Liberty" to the left, and the date with the mint mark to the right. The back of the 1985 D penny features the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the memorial, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside. This level of detail is one reason many people find Lincoln cents so fascinating, even decades later. Now, let's talk about what makes the 1985 D penny unique. In terms of production, it was made in massive numbers. The Denver Mint struck more than 5 billion pennies that year. That's billion with a B. Because of that, this coin is very common in circulated condition. You can still find it in pocket change today, mixed in with newer pennies. So if it's so common, why are collectors interested in it at all? The answer lies in condition, errors, and history. While most 1985 D pennies are worth just 1 cent, a small number stand out due to how well they were preserved or because something went wrong during the minting process. One of the most talked about aspects of the 1985 D penny is minting errors. Errors happen when something goes slightly wrong as the coin is being struck. These mistakes often escape into circulation before anyone notices. For collectors, these errors can transform an ordinary penny into a valuable find. Some known errors for the 1985 D penny include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, leaving part of the coin blank. There are also double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled because the die itself was misaligned. These errors are subtle, but once you know what to look for, they can be spotted with a magnifying glass. Another issue collectors watch for is improper metal plating. Because these pennies are copper-plated zinc, sometimes the copper coating is uneven, missing, or blistered. A penny with exposed zinc or unusual surface textures can catch a collector's attention, especially if the error is dramatic. Condition is another key factor. Most 1985 D pennies were heavily circulated. They were used in vending machines, cash registers, and everyday transactions for decades. Finding one in near-perfect condition is surprisingly difficult. Coins that show no wear, sharp details, and original shine are called uncirculated, and they are far more desirable than in top-grade condition. Certified by professional grading services, a 1985 D penny can sell for far more than 1 cent. High-grade examples have sold at auction for anywhere from a few dollars to over $100, depending on the exact grade and eye appeal. While that may not sound life-changing, it's impressive for a penny that most people overlook. Error coins, on the other hand, can bring even higher prices. A clear double die or a dramatic off-center strike can sell for hundreds of dollars to the right collector. These prices depend on how obvious the error is, how well the coin is preserved, and how many similar examples are known to exist. So how do you know if you have a real 1985 D penny and not something altered or fake? The good news is that counterfeit pennies from this era are extremely rare. Still, it's important to know what to check. First, look at the date and the mint mark. The D should appear below the date, not floating or touching the numbers in an unusual way. Next, weigh the coin if you can. A genuine 1985 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly heavier or lighter, that could indicate damage, corrosion, or an unusual error. The edge should be smooth, and the color should match typical copper-plated zinc pennies unless an error is present. Magnification is your best friend. A simple magnifying glass can reveal doubling in the letters, cracks in the design, or plating issues. If you believe you found something special, professional coin dealers or grading services can confirm its authenticity and value. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1985 D penny. Even though it's not solid copper, many people mistakenly save these coins believing they contain valuable metal. Another interesting detail is that because billions were made, this coin serves as a time capsule of everyday American life in the 1980s. Nearly everyone alive at the time used these pennies without a second thought. Collectors today love the 1985 D penny not because it's rare in general, but because it represents opportunity. It reminds people that valuable coins don't always come from ancient times or famous gold rushes. Sometimes value hides in plain sight, in coins that pass through countless hands. For new collectors, this penny is also a great starting point. It's affordable, easy to find, and teaches important lessons about mint marks, condition, and errors. For experienced collectors, finding a high-grade or error example is a satisfying challenge. As we reach the end of the story, the 1985 D Lincoln penny stands as a quiet reminder that history isn't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's small, copper-colored, and hiding in a jar on your shelf. The next time you see a penny dated 1985 with a tiny D beneath the year, take a moment to really look at it. Because even the most ordinary coin can carry an extraordinary story, waiting for the right person to notice. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a penny you've ignored for decades. It looks ordinary. The date says 1987. There's no mint mark. Most people would spend it without a second thought. But what if that small detail is exactly why collectors stop and look twice? Today we're talking about the 1987 no mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it feels like one of the most common coins in America. Millions were made. People used them every day. And yet, this humble penny has a story, a place in U.S. history, and a quiet appeal that keeps collectors searching through jars, drawers, and old rolls even today. The 1987 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. By 1987, the design was already familiar to generations of Americans. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been used since 1959. This was a penny people trusted, recognized, and rarely questioned. When a 1987 penny has no mint mark, it means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For much of U.S. coin history, Philadelphia did not place a mint mark on its coins. So no mint mark isn't a mistake. It's a sign of where the coin was made. In 1987, the Philadelphia Mint produced well over 4 billion Lincoln pennies. That number alone explains why these coins are still everywhere today. So why were so many pennies made in 1987? The answer is simple. Pennies were heavily used. Vending machines, parking meters, gas stations, grocery stores, and payphones all relied on small change. The U.S. economy needed an enormous supply of 1-cent coins to keep everyday transactions moving. The Lincoln penny was a workhorse of American commerce, and 1987 was no exception. The metal composition of the 1987 penny is also part of its story. By this time, pennies were no longer made primarily of copper. Rising copper prices in the early 1980s forced the U.S. Mint to change the formula. Starting in 1982, Lincoln pennies were made of zinc with a thin copper coating. The 1987 no mint mark penny is about 97.5% zinc and 2.5% copper. It looks like copper, but inside, it's mostly zinc. This change matters to collectors because it affects weight, durability, and long-term condition. Zinc cents are more vulnerable to corrosion if the copper plating is damaged. That's why truly pristine 1987 pennies are harder to find than you might expect. Many spent decades in circulation, picking up scratches, stains, and wear. The design details on a 1987 penny are subtle but important. Lincoln's portrait should show clear separation in the hair and beard. The word Liberty should be sharp and readable. The date 1987 should have clean, even numbers. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial should show visible columns, and if the coin is well struck, you can even see the tiny statue of Lincoln between them. Most 1987 no mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. That's the reality, and it's important to say it clearly. This is not a coin that routinely sells for thousands of dollars. But value in coin collecting isn't only about rarity. It's also about condition, errors, and collector demand. In very high condition, known as uncirculated or mint state, a 1987 penny can be worth more. Coins graded MS-65 red or higher by professional grading services can sell for several dollars. In exceptional cases, coins graded MS-67 red have sold at auction for significantly more, sometimes reaching into the low hundreds of dollars. These are coins with blazing red color, sharp detail, and virtually no marks. Errors are another reason collectors pay attention to this date. While there are no famous, widely recognized major errors unique to the 1987 penny, minor errors do exist. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and weak strikes can all add value depending on how dramatic the error is. A clearly off-center 1987 penny with no mint mark can sell for tens of dollars, sometimes more if the error is visually striking. Collectors also look for plating issues. Because these pennies are copper-plated zinc, damage to the thin copper layer can reveal the gray zinc underneath. While corrosion usually lowers value, certain mint-caused plating errors can attract interest. The key is determining whether the issue happened at the mint or later in circulation. So how do you know if your 1987 no mint mark penny is real and not altered? First, check the weight. A genuine 1987 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. A significantly heavier coin might be from an earlier copper composition, while a much lighter coin could be damaged or altered. Second, examine the surface. Real coins have a consistent texture. Signs of sanding, plating, or artificial coloring are red flags. Look closely at the date and lettering. On authentic coins, the numbers and letters are part of the strike, not added later. If anything looks uneven, blurry, or raised in an unnatural way, it's worth being cautious. If you believe you found a high-grade or error coin, professional authentication is always the safest route. One surprising fact about the 1987 penny is how it represents the end of an era without anyone realizing it at the time. Just a few years later, changes in minting practices, coin collecting habits, and even public attitudes toward the penny would begin to shift. Today, many people question whether the 1-cent coin should even exist. That makes everyday pennies from the past feel a little more historical. Another fun detail is that millions of people alive today were born in 1987. For them, this penny is a birth year coin. That personal connection adds emotional value, even if the market value is small. Many collectors start by saving coins from their birth year, and the 1987 no mint mark penny is often part of that first collection. Collectors love this coin not because it's rare, but because it's accessible. You don't need deep pockets to collect Lincoln pennies. You can learn about grading, condition, and minting just by studying coins you already have. The 1987 penny is a perfect teaching coin. It shows how small differences in condition can mean the difference between 1 cent and a much higher value. It also reminds collectors that history isn't always about dramatic events. Sometimes it's about everyday objects that quietly pass through millions of hands. Each 1987 penny was part of someone's life. It bought a newspaper, sat in a school lunch line, or jingled in a pocket during a long drive. As interest in coins continues to grow online, more people are revisiting dates they once ignored. The 1987 no mint mark Lincoln penny fits perfectly into that trend. It's common, familiar, and yet full of small details that reward careful attention. So the next time you see a penny dated 1987 with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look at its color. Check its details. Think about where it's been and what it represents. Most will be worth just a cent, but a few might surprise you. And even if you don't find a valuable one, you'll gain something just as important: a deeper appreciation for the hidden stories inside the smallest coins we use every day. Because in the world of coin collecting, curiosity is often worth more than the coin itself. Most people would never look twice at a 1997 penny. Feels ordinary, common, almost invisible. But what if I told you that one small detail on a 1997 Lincoln penny has caused certain examples to sell for far more than face value, and that millions of people may have unknowingly spent one of these coins without realizing what they had? This is the story of the 1997 D-Mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that sits quietly in jars, drawers, and pockets, yet holds a surprising place in modern American coin history. The 1997 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint. During a time of economic growth, technological change, and renewed interest in collecting everyday objects, the D Mint mark means it was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the most active coin-producing facilities in the country. In 1997 alone, billions of Lincoln pennies were made across different mints, making this one of the most familiar coins Americans have ever handled. But familiarity does not always mean unimportant. The Lincoln penny itself has a long and meaningful history. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln, it became the first U.S. circulating coin to feature a real person. By 1997, Lincoln had already been on the penny for nearly 90 years, making the design one of the most recognizable in American history. The obverse shows Lincoln's profile, dignified and calm, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right, just below the mint mark. The reverse of the 1997 penny still featured the Lincoln Memorial, a design first introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial, making it one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. This design choice connects everyday Americans to national history in a quiet but powerful way. The year 1997 was not chosen for any special anniversary of Lincoln, but it reflects an era when the U.S. Mint was focused on producing large quantities of coins efficiently. America was using cash heavily, vending machines were everywhere, and pennies were still considered essential for daily transactions. That meant speed, volume, and consistency mattered more than artistic change. The metal composition of the 1997 penny is another detail many people overlook. Unlike older copper pennies made before 1982, this coin is mostly zinc. It has a zinc core with a very thin copper coating, giving it the familiar reddish-brown color. This change was made to reduce production costs, but it also introduced new types of errors and weaknesses that collectors watch for closely today. At first glance, a 1997 penny looks no different from any other modern penny. But collectors know that value often hides in small details. The weight should be about 2.5 grams. The color should be even, without bubbling or peeling. The edges should be smooth, with no seams. Any deviation from these expectations can signal something unusual. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made by the billions? The answer lies in condition, rarity within variation, and errors. While the average 1997 penny in circulated condition is worth only 1 cent, coins in pristine, uncirculated condition can be worth more. Pennies that were never used, never scratched, and never dulled by circulation can sell for several dollars, especially if they grade high on the professional coin grading scale. Coins graded MS67 or higher by respected grading services have sold at auction for prices that surprise most people who think modern pennies are worthless. Even more interesting are error coins. The 1997 penny is known among collectors for a variety of mint errors. These include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the blank. There are also double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a mistake in the die creation process. These doubling effects are often most visible on the date, the word liberty, or in God we trust. Another error collectors look for is a weak or missing mint mark. On some 1997 pennies, the D can appear faint, partially filled, or oddly shaped. While a completely missing mint mark is extremely rare for Denver coins, weak impressions can still add interest and value. There are also zinc-related errors, such as plating blisters or exposed zinc. Over time, the thin copper layer can separate, creating bubbles or gray patches. While not all collectors value these, certain dramatic examples have sold for notable prices. Real auction records show that high-grade 1997 pennies have sold for anywhere from $20 to over $100, depending on condition and eye appeal. Error coins can sell for even more. Some dramatic off-center strikes have sold for several $100s, especially when the date and mint mark are still clearly visible. These are not everyday prices, but they prove an important point. Even modern coins can become valuable under the right circumstances. Of course, value also attracts fakes and misunderstandings. To identify a genuine 1997 Lincoln penny, start with the basics. Check the date and the mint mark. The D should be just below the date on the front of the coin. Use a scale to check the weight. A normal coin should weigh close to 2.5 grams. Significant differences may indicate damage or alteration. Look closely at the surface. Real mint errors usually look natural and consistent with the strike process. Artificial damage often looks rough, scratched, or uneven in ways that don't match minting errors. If a coin seems unusually valuable, having it authenticated by a professional grading service is always the safest step. One surprising fact about the 1997 penny is how many people unknowingly remove valuable examples from circulation. Coins pulled fresh from rolls in 1997 and stored carefully are now far scarcer than you might think. Most were spent, scratched, and worn down over decades of use. Time itself has created rarity. Another fun detail is that many collectors today started with coins like this. Modern pennies are affordable, accessible, and familiar, making them a gateway into the hobby. The 1997 penny often appears in beginner collections, roll hunting adventures, and family coin albums. Collectors also appreciate this coin because it represents the end of an era. Just over a decade later, the Lincoln penny would undergo major design changes, including the 2009 bicentennial reverses and later the Union Shield. The 1997 design sits comfortably in the middle, a snapshot of everyday America before smartphones, before digital payments, before cashless living became common. There's also something quietly powerful about a coin that millions of people touched without thinking. Every 1997 penny passed through hands during school lunches, gas station stops, grocery stores, and late-night convenience runs. Each coin carries invisible history, even if it never becomes financially valuable. Today, collectors love the 1997 penny not because it's legendary, but because it's honest. Teaches patience, teaches attention to detail, and it reminds us that value isn't always obvious at first glance, so the next time you see a penny dated 1997 with a small D beneath the date, don't rush to spend it. Hold it for a moment, turn it over, look closely, because sometimes the most ordinary objects have the most unexpected stories, and the smallest coins can still spark curiosity, discovery, and a deeper connection to history.